Welcome to Wall Street Unspun with your host, Peter Schiff.
But it's a giant bubble in search of a pin, and it's going to find one.
Are you confused with the ups and downs of the economy and what it means to you?
Don't believe the propaganda, and that's what it is. When you're listening to an analyst on a lot of these popular financial shows, you're not getting investment advice. You're getting propaganda.
Get ready to untangle the web of misinformation provided by the mainstream media.
These firms are trying to sell you stocks. Their real clients, their banking clients, are trying to get rid of stock.
And now, here's your host of Wall Street Unspun, the president of Euro Pacific Capital and a licensed broker with a passion for truth. It's Wall Street Unspun with Peter Schiff.
Good evening and welcome. This is Neeraj Chaudhary with the Los Angeles branch of Euro Pacific Capital. I am sitting in for Peter Schiff today. He is going to be joining us a little bit later in the hour, but he asked that I start and get the evening going today. Well, I'll tell you, this has been one of the most interesting and I think potentially game-changing weeks in the American political landscape in recent memory. As you most likely know by now, in the great state of Massachusetts, hopefully the voice of fiscal conservatism, certainly the voice of the Republicans, were heard, and the voters of the liberal state of Massachusetts elected Scott Brown as their new senator to fulfill the remaining term of the late Senator Ted Kennedy's seat. He's going to be in the office for about 3 years or so. And, this is a race that as recently as a month ago, the Democratic candidate, Coakley, led by literally about 30 points in November after the primary. And she basically employed what they call the old run-out-the-clock strategy, where when she felt that she had this insurmountable lead, she could literally just run out the clock. She, as they say in the campaign business, she went dark. She did not run any ads. She did not communicate any messages. She did not engage the electorate. And as a result, Scott Brown was able to come in and talk about the issues that are on the minds of all voters and was able to pull off an upset. And, I think that the media is calling this an upset, and certainly by the rapid change in the polling data, one could call it an upset. But in terms of the values and the beliefs and the ideals of the American people, I don't think this is an upset at all. I think that hopefully what this represents for certainly the state of Massachusetts and potentially the rest of the country and a little state known as Connecticut, where our good friend Peter Schiff is running, hopefully this portends a shift in the mood of the voters towards the values that I think made this country great. Certainly the values that Peter believes in, that we all believe in, of free markets and personal contribution as opposed to trying to rely on the government. So this to me is a remarkable event, not in the sense that I think that the people have changed, but hopefully that their voices are now being heard, their voices for fiscal conservatism. Obviously, the healthcare bills making their way through Congress are now going to face some stiffened opposition because, as has been widely reported, the Democrats, even with Joe Lieberman, are not going to caucus at 60. They're going to be at 59, which means Scott Brown could represent an opportunity to slow down this massive new entitlement healthcare legislation, and hopefully bring back some fiscal conservatism to this country, which we're in desperate need of. Peter wrote a terrific commentary. For those of you who have not read it, I highly recommend that you take a look at it. He wrote some commentary about Poland. Everyone makes Polish jokes, but in reality, the Polish economy was the only member of the EU that had positive growth in 2009. Granted, it was only 1.7%, but that's while the rest of the world was in a severe recession. Also, the public debt in Poland is down at about 50% of GDP, which is much lower than the average state in throughout the rest of Europe. And in Peter's trip to Poland, he's kind of shared with us some of the things that happened there. And basically, these are people who went through the communist regime, and even 20 years later, they still remember the lessons about the inefficiencies and the inefficacies of central planning. And so they have adopted free market reforms. They have privatized state-owned enterprises. They have reduced government debt. They have reduced the number of taxes and the complexity of the tax system. They're basically doing the right thing. They're getting government out of the way of the private sector, which is just so critical. And they are adopting the free market reforms, and they are followers of the Austrian School of Economics, free market economics, which is really the only thing in the long run that's going to provide any growth to anyone anywhere in the world. My branch manager, Hemant Kathuria, just returned from a trip to Guatemala. And in Guatemala and throughout South America, and really throughout much of the world, the U.S. dollar was previously considered to be a safe store of value. Remember, these are economies that have been through hyperinflation. These are economies that, in some cases, have a lot of socialistic tendencies. But on his trip to Guatemala, he came back and he kind of really let us know that their eyes are open. They are very much believers in free market economics, and they are very concerned. The reason for Hemant's trip to Guatemala was because they're very concerned about the state of the U.S. dollar. These are people who, because of the turmoil in their own economies, had turned to the dollar as a safe haven, as a store of value. Well, now even those people are looking at the dollar. Remember, these are not people, this is not China, this is not Japan. These are regular, everyday, ordinary, private investors who rely on the U.S. dollar for a store of value because their own economies are in such turmoil. Even these people are deeply concerned about the U.S. dollar, and we're communicating with Hemant and a couple of our fellow brokers in Los Angeles about moving their holdings out of what they used to think was a safe currency. This, to me, is just an amazing story, because once you lose the faith and the confidence of investors globally in the U.S. dollar, that's really the last nail in the coffin, if you will, because the U.S. dollar, being the reserve currency in the world, enjoys what Charles de Gaulle called the exorbitant privilege of a global demand for what is effectively a national currency. Well, once that global demand evaporates, what are those people going to do? They're going to sell their dollar holdings. They're going to diversify into some of the stronger currencies, the commodity currencies, the Asian currencies, and all those dollars are going to be flooding back home to the United States and causing massive, massive inflation. So this is a historic moment in the history of our country, where the rest of the world is really starting to catch on to what's been going on in the United States, and they are beginning to show their grave concerns by diversifying their private holdings that they previously thought were safe. They're no longer safe. And at the same time, you have countries in Eastern Europe, Poland among them, that have, because of their historic knowledge of inflation, are very firmly rooted in the principles of the free market. I have a client of mine that I'm working with who was a Hungarian citizen and suffered through the severe hyperinflation, one of the worst hyperinflations known in memory, immediately after World War II. And we were talking, and he said, look, I'm very, very concerned about the state of the U.S. dollar and the U.S. economy. This is a man who's in his 80s. And so we talked about some different ideas that we could share with him, some bonds and things like that. And he said, no, I don't believe that we can get into bonds because I've been through what that inflation can do. So really the message here is that people are really catching on to what's going on in the United States, whether it's in Europe or South America or Asia, and they are in the process of diversifying out of the dollar. All those dollars are going to be coming home, and they're going to spark a massive inflation unless we do something about it. It is my sincere and fervent hope that with the election of Scott Brown to the Senate from a liberal, known kind of liberal state of Massachusetts, that maybe cooler heads will prevail and we will cut back some of the spending. We can't avoid the pain, as Peter has pointed out many, many times, but what we can do is reduce the pain instead of kicking the can down the road by getting government out of the private sector and letting the private sector do its job, letting the free market set prices instead of trying to rig the housing market, which is what the Obama administration is trying to do, and just getting the firm out of the way. We're going to go to the first caller, Eddie in Mississippi. Please, welcome to the show.
Hello, thank you. Hey, I have a couple of comments. I was hoping Peter would be on. I mean, I'm glad you're hosting the show, but my comment is basically directed towards something that Peter said last week that I found very interesting. First of all, I bought Peter's book. It's an excellent book. I've taken his advice. I've made a lot of money basically exiting the California real estate market back in 2006 when it was completely unsustainable, moved to the Midwest, very happy, realizing those gains. What I believe is that what this country really needs is leaders with integrity, and Peter generally stands head and shoulders above the other candidates. But one thing that he said that really worried me was that I thought I heard Peter say that if somebody's considering buying a house, that they should use, some type of, let's say, FHA loan, put as little down, and if it goes sour, let the property go if you can't, deal with it or whatever, and in essence, screw the bank. And what I'm concerned about is that if generally he's very, very honest about all of his positions, but I mean, I think this type of advice is the type of thing that somewhat doesn't fit the mold of the character that Peter really has. And I know that you may not be able to speak to this particular issue, but I just thought I'd bring it up. I think it's a position that, as Americans, we all need to rethink, that when you sign that piece of paper, you make those payments, and, for better or for worse, and maybe we wouldn't be in this mess. So I don't know what your thoughts are. If you have any, I'll take my...
I don't think that that Peter would advocate that somebody break their moral principles and deliberately engage in a form of kind of moral hazard where you deliberately engage in a contract and then break that contract, knowing full well that you never had any intention of fulfilling it. So I don't think that I can't, not having heard exactly what you're referring to, I can't directly speak to it. But the real problem that I think that everyone's having is that there's so much intervention in the housing market right now with the government. I think there was an article in the New York Times very recently that FHA is now sponsoring, or I think it was FHA is now sponsoring, but 96% of all new mortgages are being backed by the government. So when you have just a massive, massive government intervention, it really makes it very, very difficult for a private citizen to make good decisions based on his own expectations of the market. I'll give you a perfect example. My sister lives up in the San Francisco Bay Area, and for personal reasons, she wants to buy a home. It's a starter home. They're looking to start a family, and they've got a dog, and they just want to have a home. And it is very, very difficult for her to raise the money for the down payment and to qualify for the mortgage because the prices are being artificially propped up. There's this giant shadow inventory, millions of homes that have not even come onto the foreclosure market yet, that are being kept off the market because the banks don't want to recognize that they've made all these bad loans, and the government is basically colluding in this process and artificially keeping prices higher. So again, I don't know exactly what Peter was referring to. I don't imagine he's a very honorable man. He's not going to deliberately tell you to break a moral principle.
I mean, you must understand that. I mean, the type of thing that we saw yesterday, as far as Massachusetts, is a ray of hope, and Peter Schiff would be another ray of hope. You know what I mean?
Yes.
An anti-establishment. He's exactly what I need. I mean, what I thought I heard last week was somewhat just like, wow, I can't believe Peter would say something like that. And in any case, I still believe that he's exactly what we need. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I just think he's the best. He's the best guy out there. The one thing that I wanted to ask Peter was that Americans have never ever basically signed up for pain. And if you listen to his message, he's saying, "Hey, look, this is going to be very painful, and I'm promising you pain, but 5 years down the road, we're going to be the better for it." And he's exactly right. All of the things, his message is dead on, but I've never known Americans to basically sign up for pain. Maybe Ron Paul's district is one example, one shining example where those farmers don't get the subsidies or where their representative votes against them. But I'm praying for him to win, but at the same time, I don't know that the message is going to be what the state is going to embrace. That's my only concern, if that makes any sense to you at all.
Well, I think Peter is getting a tremendous amount of support. I mean, according to the website, www.schiffforsenate.com, he has now raised a little over $1.5 million. And in addition to that, I think Chris Dodd, having read the handwriting on the wall, has dropped out of the race. I mean, so I think that the voters in the state of Connecticut are going to get an opportunity to vote in the way that their New England brethren in the great state of Massachusetts have done. They're going to get an opportunity to vote for fiscal conservatism. The thing is that Peter is talking about things that may not be talked about in the popular media right now, but certainly I think at the level of the people know at some level that there's no free lunch, that you cannot continue running deficits forever. You cannot have the government absorbing giant sectors of the economy like healthcare, financial services, and automobiles. So I think that people at some gut level know that something is wrong. That's why you see, I don't know if you follow the national polling numbers, there's something called a right track, wrong track poll that comes out regularly. Even though Obama's polling numbers have come down, the right track, wrong track numbers are abysmal right now. Only 36.6% of the people in this country think that we are heading on, quote-unquote, the right track. So I think that at a gut level, people know that something is wrong, and I think there's a real opportunity for Peter's message to resonate with the voters. I think the fundraising and the polling and the Chris Dodd exit from the race, I think those are all positive indicators. And I'm very hopeful that the voters in the state of Connecticut are going to look around and understand what has happened in Massachusetts, and at the very least, they're going to give Peter an opportunity to be heard. Thank you very much for the call. Much appreciated. Next, we're going to go to Joe in North Carolina. Welcome, Joe. You are on the air.
Hi. Just a couple of maybe a comment and a question.
Sure.
I think you're a little wrong about the election in Massachusetts.
Okay.
Mr. Brown, he's not exactly Peter Schiff material. He wants to send troops to Afghanistan, and he wants all base staters to have health care. So I mean, yeah, it's great that they want to change up there. That they want to change the regime, but not exactly a big change. Any comment?
Well, in terms of, Scott Brown's positions, I think that the real message that's coming out of Massachusetts, you got to remember, the seat that was held by Ted Kennedy had been held by the Democrats for over 50 years. So the individual positions of Scott Brown, I think, are less important than the voice of the voice of the Massachusetts voters, which are now kind of being heard. And granted, I don't think that that we're going to see enough change come out of some of the existing kind of establishment Republicans, because in many cases they're voting for the same bills that their Democratic brethren are voting for. They just want a little change to benefit their own special interest groups. But to me, the message coming from Massachusetts, a liberal state, is don't jump too far to the left, because we are not ready for that kind of state takeover of the entire economy. Okay.
And another question was, I've talked to some people in the financial field, and the popular voice is they don't see the dollar collapsing, they don't see the dollar going down. They think it's going to be stronger. And
are these the same people who saw no housing market correction?
Probably, but
okay,
they do make a point that I'd like to ask you, because they say that with a weaker dollar, we're not going to be able to buy Chinese products like we are now.
Right.
In other words, our purchasing power is going to go down. So would it make sense to manufacture that stuff? Wouldn't manufacturing come back to America with a weaker dollar?
I've got a lot of clients who were previously in the manufacturing sector, and what they tell me to a man is that rebuilding a manufacturing sector in an economy does not take place overnight. It could take up to a generation to bring those jobs back. It's not just, these are not unskilled jobs. These are people who are highly skilled. It takes time, it takes training, it takes experience, it takes capital. Rebuilding a manufacturing sector in this country may take a generation. I mean, it took Europe and parts of Asia a generation to rebuild after World War II. So I think the sooner that we can get back on a sustainable fiscal path, the better. The sooner we can get the government out of the way of the private sector, the better. And then, yes, we will have an opportunity to rebuild a manufacturing sector. But I don't think it's going to take place overnight. I don't think it can take place overnight. The dismantling of American industry has been ongoing for 30 or more years. The rebuilding of American industry, if and when it ever takes place, I certainly hope it does take place, will not take place overnight.
I agree, but don't you think that possibly instead of a complete collapse, we could, kind of hit bottom with a weak dollar, and we realize that, hey, we need to start, making our own goods and profiting from them.
Unfortunately, the collapse doesn't just now come from within the United States, because foreign investors now own so much of our debt, and there's so much U.S. currency circulating in the rest of the world. As I was mentioning in my opening, talking about what's going on in Guatemala, there are individual investors, there are individual companies in the world who, because of the difficulties and the turmoil in their own economies, hold U.S. dollars. And they hold those dollars because they perceive those dollars as being a safe store of value. Instead of using the Argentine peso a few years ago, if you had held your money in dollars, you would have been prevented the pain of the Argentinian hyperinflation. Well, now that you don't have those investors holding dollars anymore, what are they going to do? They're going to sell their dollars and buy a stronger currency, probably the Aussie or the Kiwi or the Loonie or the Chinese renminbi or the yen, maybe even the euro, the Swiss franc, the Norwegian crown. They're going to diversify their holdings and flood their dollars onto the market. So unfortunately, because we have been running deficits for so long and because we've depended on the kindness of foreigners for so long, our fate in some ways is not fully within our own hands. And some of these other folks that are holding these dollars, when they repatriate them back to the United States, that is going to spark a severe inflation. That is the concern. And we have, in a way, we've kind of done it to ourselves by borrowing all this money from abroad.
All right. Thank you for your time.
No worries. Thank you for joining us. Much appreciated. I want to give out the phone number for calling into the show. The number is 888-678-9597. That's 888-678-9597. If you are listening and you are interested in opening an account, you may call our brokerage line directly at 800-727-7922. I'm in the Los Angeles office. We also have brokers in the Newport Beach office who can answer some more detailed questions about your own financial situation if you so choose. I want to move on now to Maury in Brazil. I apologize if I mispronounced your name.
Okay.
Want to welcome you to the show and thank you for calling from the great country of Brazil.
Okay. Thank you very much. And first, congratulations for your nice work and Peter patriotic effort to save the American economy.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
I would like to offer my total support for Peter Schiff's United States Senate effort now and after his victory. Okay.
Well, thank you. As I said, he's raised about $1.5 million from around the country, not just from Connecticut, and I think there's a lot of momentum building for change there in Connecticut.
Yeah, I am.
What can I do for you? What's your question today?
Looking very carefully to the outlook. I am an R&D research and development professional, and I am also watching and writing articles in internet on the world crisis. My question is: we had severe financial, let's say, earthquake in the United States with different types of aftershocks to the rest of the world. In your opinion, what will happen to the world economy, the intensity degree, if the United States has, in the next 2 to 3 years, another major problem that's highly probable? I am watching carefully the risks, different people, good people talking about the outlook, and my question is about the influence of another major problem in the United States, considering the Obama policies, to the rest of the world, considering all the aspects like decoupling, etc. My question is a global picture question, okay?
Sure. So, Peter has addressed this on a couple of occasions previously. The point is that the U.S. economy is not really the engine of the world economy. It's really the caboose. All we're doing really is consuming production from the rest of the world. If the United States, as we expect, goes into another protracted recession or some kind of depression or some kind of stagflationary period, I think what you're going to see is the rest of the world waking up and realizing, hey, we don't have to send our production and accept these worthless pieces of paper called dollars back in return for our hard work. We're going to turn around. We're going to consume our own production and become self-sustaining economies. And if you really look at the direction the entire world is headed, that is the direction that they are headed. Increasing consumption globally is replacing U.S. consumption, primarily in Asia. So I think that the difficulties in the United States are going to be severe and protracted because our economy is built on debt, whereas the difficulties in the rest of the world, they may go through a recession, they may have a kind of a normal pullback, but they will adjust. They will continue to grow. They will continue to save and produce, and they will consume their own production and in the long run, they're going to be fine. I think one of the previous callers said, well, won't the dollar weaken and that'll be okay because then we can start exporting again? And I think what he doesn't realize is that once the dollar weakens, it becomes kind of a free fall that feeds on itself. A lot of the reasons that people accumulate and hold dollars right now is because they have confidence in the dollar. Once they lose that confidence, it's a completely different ballgame.
Yeah. In summary, in your opinion, we can say that the intensity degree of the first, let's say, problem, what I call the financial earthquake, in your opinion, the major influence happened, and the next, if it really happens, will be weaker because the world economy is really recovering. We can say that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the world economy is already decoupling from that in the United States. If you look at the share of global GDP that is attributable to the United States, it is now far below 20%, where many years ago, back in the 80s, it was well above 30%. The economies of the so-called BRIC countries, Brazil, Russia, India, and China, now exceed in total mass the economy of the United States. So in a way, that transition is already underway and has already taken place. So what will happen to the rest of the world if the United States, if and when the United States enters another protracted decline? I think the rest of the world is going to sail through. Yeah, they may have a recession, they may have to pull back a little bit, but their economies are built on savings and production. Our economy is built on debt, and no country, in my knowledge, has ever been able to borrow its way to prosperity. But thank you very much for your call. As those of you know who have heard me host the show before, I absolutely think it's terrific when we have callers from the rest of the world. That gentleman was from one of the stars of the global economy now. The Brazilians are so strong that they recently tried to halt the rise of their currency by introducing a currency tax. I don't think that will be successful. It's just a very strong economy, and I think their currency is going to reflect it. And, that's another point that I wanted to make, is that a weaker currency, a weaker dollar, is not the sign of a strong nation and a strong economy. Back when this country was an industrial nation, back when we were producers and we led the world in production and technology and we led the world with our exports, we had a strong currency. We had a strong dollar, and that dollar represented the productive power of our citizens and the companies in our private sector. And everyone's saying now, let's have a weaker dollar. Let's devalue our dollar so we can pay back our debts in inflated dollars. Yeah, I think that that's actually a moral outrage, because we are no longer a strong industrial nation, a strong economic power. Instead, we're talking about how to kind of escape and effectively default on our debts by inflating our way out of it. That's really not the sign of a strong industrial economic power. It is unfortunately the sign of an aging power that is not headed in the right direction. And that's why I think, again, at a gut level, people in this country know that something is wrong. I don't think that the media has done a good job of educating the people about what is happening. I don't think that our political leadership has done a good job of educating people about what is happening. But at a gut level, people know when they're sitting around their kitchen table and trying to figure out how to pay their bills, they know that this government cannot run trillion-dollar deficits in perpetuity. They know something is wrong. And I'm very, very hopeful that with this this election in Massachusetts, granted, Scott Brown may turn out to be an establishment Republican, but at the very least it can be interpreted as a repudiation of the policies of the Obama administration, and hopefully will signal a shift in the direction and sort of future of the country if we can get some of these fiscal conservatives. I'm going to move now to Betty in New York. Betty, you've been very, very patient. Thank you so much for holding. Welcome
hi. I had a couple
to the show.
comments and a question.
Thank you.
First off, today I happen to be listening to the Glenn Beck show, which I usually don't listen to, but I was curious to hear his take on the Scott Brown victory. So he was commenting on it, and then he made the comment, which I didn't know his home state was Connecticut, about he wished his own home state of Connecticut could get some candidates that he could get behind. And I thought, like, what universe is this guy living in? Does he not know about Peter? And I'm definitely behind Peter, but he also got Linda McMahon. I'm like, is this guy kidding me? He's a national talk show host. He's on TV, and he doesn't know anything about Connecticut and what's going on. So I just thought I would pass that on.
Oh, well, Glenn Beck has had Peter on his show many times.
So what the hell was he talking about today? I'm like, is he a moron or what?
I don't know. I didn't hear. I didn't, listen or watch Glenn Beck's show today. So I can't.
This was on the radio show.
It was on the radio show. Yeah. So I didn't get a chance to hear that. I don't know exactly what he said, but Glenn Beck has had Peter on his show many times, and to my knowledge, is very well aware of his.
I couldn't understand why the heck he was making
Senate
that comment today. I'm like, is this guy an idiot or what? But I mean, I'm not. I just wanted to pass that on in case you weren't aware of that. Secondly, I'm wondering.
Hopefully, maybe it was just he misspoke. On the air.
I don't think he misspoke. I just don't understand what his motive was, by saying something like that. But in any event, the other comment I had was, has Peter Schiff thought about going on the Michael Savage show?
I don't handle Peter's bookings. I know that he's got some people back east that handle that for him. I assume that those discussions are taking place. I don't know what the status of those discussions are.
So I'd like to make the suggestion, especially like tonight, Michael Savage was talking about, he's invited various politicians on over the years. None of them will go on his show. I don't know if you're familiar with him, because he doesn't he doesn't toe the party line for either side. He's a Democrat or Republican. He's a conservative, and he's a very strong conservative. He can't ever get any politicians to come on. And he said next week that he was going to start naming names of the politicians that he's invited that refuse to come on his show when the guy's got 10 million listeners a week. So I just think that if his show plays in Connecticut, which I'm not sure whether it does or not, that Peter should definitely make an effort to try to get on his show, which I'm sure he would be glad to have him on there.
I will definitely pass that note along to Peter. I know that he's got some very hardworking people in Connecticut that are helping him in the campaign, as well as handling his media appearances. So
I just think he needs to get out on talk radio more, because those are the type of voters that are going to vote for Peter, is the ones that listen to talk radio. We're the people, the Tea Party type of people, who are absolutely fed up with the government and with the media in general, and that's why we listen to talk radio. So I just thought he should get more time on talk radio stations, because over the weekend, this is what struck me. Over the weekend, I had to go, my husband and I had to go to Milford, Connecticut. We live on Long Island. We had to go there to pick up a window that we bought from somebody up on Craigslist. And we drove right past Peter's campaign headquarters. I was like, oh, my God.
Terrific.
I didn't know that's where his campaign headquarters were.
Yes,
in New York.
And
the guy that we bought it from was literally down the block. So I asked the guy, is that Peter Schiff's campaign headquarters? And the guy's like, who? What? And I'm thinking, oh, my gosh, he's got to do some work, because this guy's down the block from his house and didn't know who I was even talking about. So I told him he should really check out Peter Schiff. So, all right, that's enough of my campaign suggestions. I do have a question economically.
Yes, go ahead,
I'm just curious what do you think the big run-up in the dollar today was all about?
The dollar is going to have its little counter-trend rallies. I think that anytime you have something that's going to go down, anytime you have a bear market, you're going to have a counter-trend. Nothing goes straight down or straight up. So, why specifically the dollar went up today, I don't think that there's any. I know a lot of commentators come on the various shows and say, well, people are taking risk off the table. I don't think on a day-to-day basis you really cannot interpret these moves I think you have to look at the big picture and recognize that the dollar is down fairly sharply. It was down fairly sharply in 2009, and it's down longer term, going back to 2000 to where it is today, almost about 35% or so. So on a given day, if the dollar rallies a little bit, I mean, you've got a lot of naysayers out there that will ignore all of the negative macro indicators in the United States, and they will say, well, the dollar is the reserve currency, it's not going to happen here, and what's the alternative, which in my mind is an exceptionally weak argument,
right.
Saying that the dollar is simply irreplaceable, not because it's a weak currency, but because there's nothing else out there. I think that's a very, very weak and ultimately dangerous argument because it invites complacency.
Right.
So on a given day, why is the dollar up or down? I don't think anyone really, really knows. I think it's just kind of flows of capital in the marketplace. Ultimately, this scenario is going to play out to the downside because of the structural problems that we have in the United States.
Just one more question. What impact
Sure.
do you see on us by what's going on in China right now with them pulling the reins in on their banking sector?
Well, I think that as amazing as a growth story is in China, they may be prone to making some of the same mistakes that we're making. I think they're trying to curb lending. I think that they are witnessing, I think there was a note out recently that property values and loan values were up 75% in China in 2009. That is absolutely not sustainable.
Right.
Ultimately, if they choose to, right now they're choosing to inflate their economy. We're basically exporting our inflation to the rest of the world, including to the Chinese. If they choose not to inflate their economy, they will be able to basically consume more of their own production. There's a lot of speculation that with this curb in lending and the changes in reserve requirements, that the Chinese are also going to revalue the renminbi higher. That's going to hurt their ability, if you will, or if you look at it paradoxically, it's going to hurt their ability to continue to finance U.S. deficits. So ultimately, by not inflating their economies, they're doing the right thing in allowing their own consumers to consume their own production. It will ultimately hurt their ability to finance ongoing U.S. deficits. It will ultimately hurt the United States by causing higher interest rates here.
Okay,
so that's
thank you very
basically
much.
the impact. Thank you so much for calling, Betty. Much appreciated. I want to move on now to Mike in California. Where are you in California, Mike? Welcome to the show.
I'm in the rain in San Diego.
Yeah, I'm in the rain in Los Angeles. We're not used to it in California. Every time a couple of drops of rain hits this state, everyone goes on high alert, and the storm center people come out, and there are floods on the roadways and accidents, and unfortunately a couple, I think, of deaths, but that's not funny.
Yeah.
But we're not used to the rain. How are things in San Diego?
We're doing well here. Hey, I had a couple of questions for you. First of all, I wanted to get your views on IRAs, in particular Roth IRA. I've got a significant amount of my holdings in a Roth IRA, and
okay.
I'm real concerned about down the road that the rules are going to get changed, and we're going to say, "Oops, we weren't going to tax you on your gains on that, but things aren't working out so well, so we're going to need to tax you." So on your gains, and so. My thought is to pay the penalty, the 10% penalty, as well as the taxes, and get it out of there, and put it either into brokerage or get some gold and silver with it. And would be interested in your thoughts on that.
We're not tax advisors. Our firm is not licensed to provide tax advice, so I don't want to give you bad information.
Okay.
I would say in general that the conversions that people do are exactly for the reason that you just stated, which is concerns about the government turning around, changing the rules on us, and starting to, tax some of the gains from these Roth accounts. So, your concerns, I think, are valid to the extent that they reflect a kind of an activist government mentality that is going to run around seeking for new ways to tax people especially as these deficits begin to mount. But your situation in particular, I'm sorry, I just can't give you, reliable information.
Okay, sure, I understand. That is helpful, though. I guess my other thing is actually just a question or a comment, and it's directed at Peter. So I don't know how well you might be able to answer it, but
sure.
I'm real open to Peter's message. I have done quite a bit of learning over the past year about our economics, and have read both the Crash Proof books as well as the little book, and I think I've actually contributed to Peter's campaign, and
terrific.
And one question that I have that concerns me when I hear Peter talk is about the regulation and the how he comes across to me as saying absolutely no regulation, unbridled free market and stuff, and I am certainly the direction we're going is entirely wrong in my opinion. However, I do have some concerns that. I guess my best analogy I can think of is maybe our road system. That if you just threw down asphalt and said, okay, everybody drive, and there are no rules, it's going to be chaos. And I've been on roads in India like that.
Right.
And however, if you put some stripes on it and you put up some speed limits every so often, precarious places and traffic signals and stuff. Overall, it works more efficiently and more effectively. But I certainly don't want somebody in the seat driving for me or telling me how to drive, in my car. But
that's exactly the problem. I mean, being in California, that as of, I guess, about a year ago, Californians are no longer allowed to talk on their cell phones while they're driving. That sounds like a perfectly reasonable regulation to me. But I've also seen people reading while they're driving. I've seen people fiddling with babies, kind of having their children in the car and not paying attention to the road that way. I've seen women applying makeup, while they're at a stoplight, and then the stoplight turns green and they're still applying their makeup. So the problem with government regulation is that you cannot account for every possibility, and so you cannot legislate everything. The other problem with government regulation is that it has unintended consequences. Fannie and Freddie, the mission for Fannie and Freddie were greatly expanded back in the 90s under the Clinton administration,
right,
with the seemingly laudable goal of increasing home ownership, especially amongst minorities. Now that sounds like a very reasonable goal. Hey, let's build these communities. Let's get people to own the houses that they are living in. It's going to create a sense of pride, a sense of community, and it's going to build more stability and really provide kind of a better social experience and social life for these people. Great goal, great idea. But if you then introduce these massive new government entities, government-sponsored entities, Fannie and Freddie, fast forward to 10 years later, and you end up with the housing bubble. So, is some government regulation, if in the area of a road, people driving on one side of the road instead of the other side of the road, everybody drives on the right, is that a good government regulation? Yeah, that's what I'm in favor of. But we're absolutely heading in the wrong direction with just the massive takeover and the massive regulation of all aspects of private life, and that's really the problem.
Yeah. Okay. And I certainly agree with that. And I'm using the road analogy, but I would apply it to other areas. I mean, financial industry and that sort of thing too. I think there's some reasonable regulation that needs to be there. And maybe that's my issue, is that I think there needs to be reasonable regulation with enforcement.
Right.
And if the cops are on the side of the road, they're going to give you a ticket for going 110 miles an hour. Hey, I'm all for it. Right now, though, unfortunately, our financial industry cops were letting people go 110 miles an hour and not pulling anybody over, and we had all kinds of problems based on it. So I guess that's
the key is that we're headed in the wrong direction. We need people back on the line. Peter, I'm getting a note from our control room. Peter, are you on the line with us?
I'm here. I just left the Republican Town Committee meeting in Meriden, and I'm on my way back home, and it went a lot longer than I thought because I was the last speaker of there were several other candidates for different offices in the state of Connecticut before I had a chance to speak. So unfortunately, I had to miss the show. But, you know, it's a campaign, and it's got to go on. I spoke in Westport Republican Town Council last night, and tomorrow night I'm going to be speaking in Ridgefield. But the good news is I think I'm winning over a lot of converts. I think every place I speak, I think a lot of people are, you know, being won over. I think, you know, I really do think I can win this race. And I think the more people that hear me speak and are exposed to my background and my ideas, I'm getting a lot of supporters. And, you know, the fundraising is picking up. You know, I've raised $300,000 in the last month, you know, just mainly on the Internet through a couple of emails, and I think that's great. You know, there was a small money bomb on Sunday that raised about $30,000, and I think we raised over $20,000 today. The money is coming in steadily, so that's going to help. And I think what happened in Massachusetts with Scott Brown, you know, surprise, you know, upset of, you know, to take Ted Kennedy's seat that he held for almost half a century. Remember, he ran against the heavily favored Attorney General. That's the same situation I'm going to face here in Connecticut with a heavily favored incumbent Attorney General running for Senate. And I think this victory is energizing the Republican Party, the Tea Partiers, Ron Paul people, to see that there's a real political wind blowing in our direction. And hopefully he can blow me right into the Senate for Connecticut so that I can help prevent the worst-case scenario from actually coming true. Because right now we're still on course for that, because I still don't think that anybody in government really understands it, including, you know, Brown. I mean, he was elected. Sure, he's not a Democrat, and he's going to oppose health care. That's good. But unfortunately, based on his record in public service, there are a lot of other big government initiatives that he's not going to oppose. And we really need to get a Republican in Congress that understands the real damage that the government has done to our economy and the damage that it continues to inflict on our economy with each new bill that they pass. Every time they stimulate, every time they regulate, every time they bail somebody out, they're making the economy worse. We have to embrace free market principles, and we have to allow those principles to work, even if in the short run we don't like the consequences, because in the long run, that's the only way to have a vibrant, growing, prosperous economy.
Absolutely,
but,
absolutely.
So how was the show so far?
You know, I think it's been great. We've had a lot of interest in your campaign. We also have a couple of callers. I'd love to be able to get you to speak with them
I know
on
we
the
had
air.
a pretty big rally in the dollar today. I know a lot of people I saw on CNBC were calling it significant. We're now going to have a big rally in the dollar. You know, I don't see that at all. You know, the catalyst for the dollar rally was the fact that the Chinese are tightening up their monetary policy. Well, that's long-term negative for the dollar. If China is raising interest rates, that makes the RMB more attractive. That will pull capital out of dollars into China. And ultimately, if the Chinese are not printing as much money, they don't have to buy as many treasuries. So that means the Fed's going to have to step up and buy even more. Now, they don't have to, but they will, and that's inflationary. They print more dollars. So if people understand the real consequences of tight money in China, it's a weak dollar. It's not a strong dollar. Now, if we tighten, right, if we match the increases in China, then that might be bullish for the dollar near term, but we're not going to do that. No one thinks we're going to keep interest rates at zero.
That's right. And there's no political will in Washington to actually turn some of these deficits into surpluses. And so as a result, I think we don't have any hope but to go down this inflationary path. Peter, I'd love to get you on the air with Mark in Saudi Arabia. We've got only about 5 minutes left, but he's been waiting
put him through
very patiently. Mark in Saudi Arabia, you are on the air with Peter Schiff.
Hey, guys, can you hear me?
Yes, Mark, please go ahead.
Okay, great. Just real quick story. My friend Chris Kathis here in Riyadh has a brother who has kids, and before they can open their Christmas gifts, he makes them watch the Peter Schiff weblog. So I thought that was kind of funny.
That's great.
My comment, though, is about I've been trying to call the phone bank. And, Peter, I'm not sure if you know this, but it doesn't work. It doesn't let you make calls. I've only been able to make 20 the past week. So I just wanted to register that if there's anything you guys can do.
Yeah, I got to talk to the campaign. Initially, I didn't realize it stopped you after 10. The old concept prompt you to make 10 calls a day, but that wasn't a maximum that you can make more. I've got to get the bugs out of that system, because the idea, and I'll try to get to it again tomorrow, is for people to be able to go to the phone banks and make as many calls as they want every day. My suggestion was that if everybody can just make 10 calls per day, that would be plenty. If enough people did it, we would blanket the state and we would reach every voter many times over.
Okay. Yeah, cool. Well, I'm glad you're aware of it, so thank you very much.
Thank you, and thanks for your help. Thanks for your donations and the calls.
Okay,
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mark.
Thank you.
Peter, tell us a little bit more about how the campaign is going in Connecticut. You mentioned that you were speaking this evening. Tell us a little bit more about kind of the energy and the excitement over there.
People are very excited. You know, I get a lot of applause when I speak. I get a lot of very good questions. A lot of people come up and shake my hand, and how can I volunteer? How can I work for your campaign? I think I'm energizing. I think people really appreciate what I'm saying. I think I'm very unique as a candidate. I think I have a unique, a mixture of experience and education and knowledge, and I think that people understand that the country is in serious trouble, that there is a real economic and financial crisis, and that we need different ideas and solutions from the perspective of entrepreneurs and people that understand economics and finance. And I think, when they learn that I predicted much of what happened, that's what we need. I mean, we need people like me in Washington, because right now there's nobody like me. I mean, there's Ron Paul in the House. There's certainly nobody like me in the Senate. And, the Senate, it's a more important body, and certainly as a senator I can do a lot to disrupt this course and to stop the legislation from being passed and to maybe stop the deficits from increasing. So they understand that. I think that there's a lot of momentum here, and as I said, with the election in Massachusetts last night, that's going to give people more courage. Before it was, well, we knew we could win because we had Chris Dodd. When Chris Dodd dropped out, that maybe took some of the wind out of our sails as Republicans. But now that we saw Massachusetts, the wind is blowing again, and the sails are full. So I feel good about that. I feel good about my chances. We're going to start to do, I know a lot of people have been critical that we haven't done a lot of advertising yet. That's all going to start. It's all coming. I put together, I'm interviewing a campaign manager tomorrow. I haven't even had a campaign manager yet. We've had people doing it, but I'm interviewing a guy tomorrow. I've got 3 new consultants in place. I've just hired a media person. We're going to be coming out with major advertising in direct mail, television, radio. I'm not going to give out my whole campaign strategy, because obviously, I don't want to show my hand to my opponents. But people need to trust me that I have a game plan to win this election, to win the Republican nomination, and to win in the general election. And what people can do right now is they can donate to the campaign. They can send as much as they can, so I have the resources to do what I need to do, and they can donate their time to help me get out my message, because the more volunteers I have, the easier it is to communicate that message. And if we all work together, I can win this race.
Outstanding. And just to let everyone know, that website is www.schiffforsenate.com, www.schiffforsenate.com. There's a tremendous amount of information there. You can take the opportunity to donate to the campaign. You can take the opportunity to volunteer.
Yeah. It's funny. What's starting to happen now, there's some of my opponents or some critics are trying to make an issue with the fact that I have so much of my money invested abroad. They're criticizing me for having money invested in China, for example, and not having more money invested in the United States. And I have to point out that I'd love to be investing more in the United States if it wasn't for all the regulation that we're undermining our companies and the Federal Reserve destroying the value of our currency. I would invest more in the United States. I do have some investments here, but unfortunately, to protect and preserve my wealth for myself and for my clients, I've been forced to look for opportunities abroad so that we can protect ourselves from the disastrous policies emanating out of Washington. And if I can go to Washington and change those policies, we won't have to invest abroad. We'll be able to invest here. That is the problem. We don't want a government policy that chases capital out. We want it that pulls it in. We need to treat capital well. We need to treat investors well. We need to pursue sound money policies so that people can be confident that long-term returns that they achieve are not going to be destroyed.
You're absolutely right, Peter. We've got to wrap up. A few seconds left. Thank you so much. Best of luck, and we'll see you all next week.
Thank you for filling in on short notice. I'm sure you did a great job, and everybody was entertained. As far as I know, I will be back next week on next Wednesday. But as I said, you never know in this political game.
Great.